Order. Order. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Callum Bromley.
Right, ladies and gents, thank you for coming to our public meeting tonight at the Coach and Horses. From George's perspective, it's about talking about Britain, Brexit and the general election. But from me, it's about why George is the best candidate for West Bromwich East. Now, up and down the country, we know what the state of politics is. Constituencies up and down have got one choice or the other. The two mainstream parties. They can either vote for Boris Johnson or they can vote for Jeremy Corbyn. Now that's not something that we take lightly in West Bromwich, and we have a better option. We have a unique opportunity with a candidate who I say is the two birds, one stone really. He's a Brexiteer who wants to leave the European Union, but on the other hand, he's a working class man. He comes from the same background. He comes from the same background in which we live. He understands what it's like to live like us, but most importantly, he wants to represent us and give us a voice. Now, when we look at the candidates and the parties that we have standing in West Bromwich East, we have the Lib Dems, that for the first time I actually saw today with their little rosettes, which I ain't going to go into too much about them because they're irrelevant, they've got no say, they're just the party that they've got. That next step up is the Brexit Party. Now, this is one that's a little bit close to my heart because I've actually supported the Brexit Party before coming to George. I believed in the clean break Brexit in which Nigel was pushing, months and months and months, only to then make a big U-turn and misrepresent the people who follow it. Right, but when you look at that logo on the ballot paper, don't be fooled by the Brexit Party. Don't be fooled by the message. Have a look at the candidate. The candidate is not from our area. Dr. Christian Lucas, I think, the dentist. He's got no interest in meeting us. All he wants to do is sit himself on the paper and expect us to vote for the name. And that's not what I want. Then we have the next step up, which are the two mainstream parties. And really the big thing for me. On the one hand, we have the Conservatives that, for the rest of the country, I've got no doubt that they are the better option than the alternative. But for us in West Bromwich East, we don't want that. Because the only message that they have is, let's get Brexit done. But actually, once Brexit is done, what comes after that for the people of West Bromwich? We're working class, and we know that these are for the rich. And from my understanding, none of us in this room are rich. We don't want that in West Bromwich East. And if you vote for that, then we deserve what comes. But then, the other side to politics, which is the funniest, you have the Labour Party. Now, I actually sat back last night and had a little bit of a thought. I thought, how lucky were we to have Tom Watson for years? Now, before you all give me a little bit of a boo, just let me understand why. Because compared to the candidate that they have parachuted in, he's a lot better option. And that is really a scary thought to have in the back of our minds. From the last few days, I don't know if you've seen in the papers and on news or social media about our very own Ibrahim Douglas, the mayor of Lambeth and the multi-millionaire kebab shop tycoon, who decides to pay his employees £3.87 an hour, and then has the audacity to come to West Bromwich East and push that he wants £10 minimum wage for us. What does he take us for? Now, for me, that was just a start. The final nail in the coffin is the fact that this man has tried to smuggle taxpayers' money out of the country. Thousands of pounds hidden in socks, purses, handbags, smuggled to Turkey. And I think that come to 11,500, I believe, George?
On that occasion.
Oh, well, yeah, that's what we know about. Now, for you that know the Samwell Skidder in West Brom, there's a little bit of a video released today of him following Mr. Douglas around, asking him to show us his socks. But I think the bit that I found the most annoying for me was he denied it. And then when asked about the court's decision to take this money, he then tells us that's what the court thought was best. So therefore, you've just admitted right in front of the people that you are taking money. And I'm not shocked at the Labour Party anymore. I'm not angry at the Labour Party anymore, because this is what we expect from them. But I think the biggest part and the anger is they've put this man into a working class area, a low income area that's been affected by austerity and surrounded by poverty, and then they think we are stupid enough to vote for this man. And these are really the choices from the parties that we have. But for me, I don't want a party in West Bromwich anymore. I want an independent Brexiteer, a man that does not answer to the party whip and only to the people who represent him. Okay? George knows that he will be a public servant, and it's us that he answers to, not the party. And on that note, I think I've spoken for a little bit too long, because I know that you're here to see George, and it's my turn to actually get a drink in for you. Would you like a Coke?
Oh, okay.
Have a Coke? Right.
Thank you very much.
On that note, or if you Mr. Douglas, many notes, please welcome Mr. George Galloway.
You're good, Callum. You are. I said on Friday night, and I say it with even more emphasis tonight, Callum Bromley is the most impressive 23-year-old I've seen since I was 23. And so I'm sure he's got a long career in public speaking, and I hope in public office ahead of him. Many thanks for that wonderful introduction, setting the scene for tonight's meeting, and many thanks to all of you braving again the necessarily inclement weather at this time of year. It's going to be dark at 3:30 on polling day, so you better all have torches in your bags and pockets on the way to the polls. It's also likely to be rather bitter and probably wet weather. And so we're probably looking at a lower turnout in the general election than we've had for a long time, which will compound the feeling of alienation that is now everywhere in the country, but certainly here in the West Midlands, about electing a political class, overwhelmingly Labour, that do nothing except fill their pockets and let the people down. That's the lived experience in the West Midlands of Labour representation, and I'll explain one or two examples of that. Let's start with the Tom Watson that Callum referred to. Nobody ever imagined that they would look back fondly on the days when Tom Watson was the Labour representative here. At least he didn't keep his money in his socks. Maybe he had it around his middle, I don't know. What happened to Tom Watson? Where is he? He has gone completely silent as the whole country now comes to grips with the extremely important general election. We haven't seen him on a national level, and I'm pretty sure we're not going to be seeing him here in West Bromwich East. Thank you, Callum. I know that the Labour General Secretary yesterday came here to tell Ibrahim Douglas, the Labour candidate, that he was on his own, that nobody would be coming from the top leadership of the Labour Party to stand beside him. So she's the last leading Labour figure who will ever be photographed next to Ibrahim Douglas. And we now know why, though trust me, you don't know the half of it. You don't know what's coming in the papers tomorrow and the next day and Sunday and again in the following days and weeks that lie ahead. It takes some kind of reverse genius to pick a worse candidate than Tom Watson. But that's what Labour have managed to do. Although pick is not actually the appropriate word, because they didn't pick him. Watson timed his resignation exactly to the moment when the local Labour members, some of whom are in here this evening, would have absolutely no say at all on who would represent them as the Labour candidate. How's that for contempt? All these 18 years that these Labour members in West Brom East loyally knocked on doors and delivered leaflets and turned out rain, hail and shine to support Tom Watson, he deliberately timed his exit so that only a handful of people at the top of the Labour Party would have the right to pick his successor. And he's no doubt levied a price for that. And we won't know what that price is until after the 12th of December. But price, you can be sure there will be, because anybody who believes that Tom Watson really is going to go off and become a fitness instructor, I've got a bridge in London, I could sell them at a knockdown price. Anybody who believes Tom Watson's going to open Tom's Gym, Tom's No Diner, is fooling themselves. He's going to the House of Lords. Except he might not get past the commission that has to approve the membership of the House of Lords. And trust me, there's some rum characters in the House of Lords. But Watson may be too rum even for them. And I refer, of course, to something I haven't spoken about in this campaign until now, to the Carl Beach affair. A raving fantasist, now serving 17 years in prison for falsely maligning the reputation of other people as a paedophile when the paedophile was Carl Beach himself, convicted of this. Watson abused parliamentary privilege to assail people who were not there to answer back, and the families of those assailed are all, or were all, praying for Watson's defeat at this general election, which is one of the reasons he ran away. And the other reason he ran away, if I may say so, was me.
Hey.
Trust me, if you're a football fan, coming up against me is a bit like coming up against Ibrahimovic. Not necessarily all that subtle, but lots of elbows, knees, and big tackety boots. When I'm fighting someone, they know about it. And when I'm fighting for someone, everybody knows about it. And I was so looking forward to fighting Tom Watson. I was looking forward to it as much as he was not looking forward to it. And that's why he ran away. But Ibrahim Douglas, I knew the minute I saw his name on that parachute coming down from the Labour aeroplane, when it was too late for anyone to object, I knew that trouble lay ahead, because I've known of this man for many years. And I'm not able, because of the laws that govern us, to tell you things that are not yet in the public domain. But there's enough in the public domain to persuade you, and I think thousands of Labour voters will be so persuaded that this man is not fit to be the Member of Parliament for this community. He is a dodgy kebab. He's as dodgy as any kebab you have ever purchased in any greasy spoon anywhere in this country. As we say in Scotland, he's as dodgy as a 9-bob note stuffed down his socks. Somebody said to me on Twitter tonight, wrap up, you need to put on your thermal socks. And I couldn't help but think, that's not a problem Dogus is going to have, because his socks are filled with £50 notes. And he didn't just say this to the Skidder today, he said it to the BBC. He said, and I quote, "It's a perfectly normal thing to give relatives money to take to family overseas." Well, that might be true, but not £11,500 hidden in socks. And you've got to ask yourself, how many aunts has he got? How many socks has he got? And then I got to thinking, how many socks would you need for £11,500 in cash? There must have been nothing but socks in his auntie's luggage. I mean, did they think the customs and excise men would not notice this old auntie with 150 pairs of socks in her luggage? Now, it may be the only time he ever did this. And again, if you believe that, I've got a bridge that I can sell you. But the judge was clear. This man's story was, and I quote, unbelievable, unquote. And that from the judge's point of view, this money was clearly an attempt at tax evasion. So there you have it. Labour, which is promising to crack down on tax evasion, has put up a candidate that a judge has already found guilty of tax evasion. He says he has a small business, but he's a multi-millionaire. That's a very strange definition of small business. And how did he make these multi-millions? Well, in part because he pays none of his employees the very national living wage that Labour is campaigning in this election to introduce. But he doesn't pay it to his own workers. As a matter of fact, he pays no more than the national minimum wage to his workers. And the £3.87, and that wage slip was a couple of years out of date, that £3.87 was the young person's national minimum wage. Even though Labour campaigns against having two national minimum wages, one for older workers and one for younger workers. Moreover, Jeremy Corbyn and Keir Starmer and Emily Thornberry and so on were all on a picket line outside McDonald's just last week, demanding £15 an hour for people that flip burgers in McDonald's. £15 an hour for McDonald's, £8.70 for Ibrahim Dogus's workers. You begin to see the hypocrisy here, the double standards here, and anyone who seriously imagines that this man is a credible representative of working class people is fooling themselves. And then there's his attitude to Brexit. Trust me, I'm not making this up. I've got one of them. On his receipts, in his restaurants, many restaurants in prime locations, beside the London Eye, opposite Parliament. He prints receipts which say on the bottom of them, Brexit is evil. And he's the candidate in a constituency where almost 7 out of 10 people for Brexit. What therefore is he saying about you? At best he's saying that you all voted for evil. At worst he's saying you are evil. Did nobody in Labour headquarters think about this? Think about the consequences of putting up a pro-EU fanatic who's a multi-millionaire kebab shop king in a poor Brexit voting constituency? Evidently, they did not. And now it's too late for them to get rid of him. Even if tomorrow's newspapers, Sunday's newspapers, next week's newspapers reveal more and more and more bad things about this man, as I confidently expect them to do. They're stuck with him. The best they can do is distance themselves from him. And I predict that that is exactly what's going to happen. As for the Conservatives, it's in a way the same argument. The Conservatives have been in power for 9 long, cold, bitter, austere years. The idea that giving them another 5 years, uncontested, can do nothing for the people of West Brom except continue the agony of this last period. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is, as Einstein said, the very definition of madness. If you do the same old, you'll get the same old, same old. And so one of the reasons why I want to return to Parliament, I've already been elected 6 times. I've already qualified for my pension. I earn good money. I don't actually myself personally need it. Is first of all to make sure that a proper Brexit is done, and secondly to make sure that working class people have a voice in this new Parliament. A voice that's loud, forgive me if I'm shouting, a voice that's powerful, that God gave me and that I use, and a voice that is listened to, can't be ignored.
Yeah.
My colleague James played me a song on the way up here by a great Liverpool band that I'd forgotten about, called The Christians. The song's called Forgotten Town. And that's what West Brom is. It's a forgotten town. For most of the people in the country, it's a football team. It's a very fine football team.
Oh, don't know about that one. I'm only joking.
No, I've always, as my Twitter timeline going back 10 years can show and prove, I've always had a real soft spot for West Brom. They're even better after today because Darren Fletcher's gone back, another fine Scotsman, back in West Bromwich.
That's 2 in West Brom.
Now, the fact that people recognise the name of the football team but have no idea that there's over 100,000 people living in West Brom is testament to the utterly pathetic political representation that you have had. I repeat what I said before, Callum. Tom Watson gave 45 television interviews on mainstream television last year. On 40 of them, he attacked his own party. In none of them, none, did he mention the words West Brom. None out of 45. He did nothing, said nothing about the fact that the West Midlands police force is now smaller than it was in 1974. Said nothing about the sell-off of police stations all over This borough, in Sandwell, there's a really fine one up for sale right now. In fact, Dogus has probably got it earmarked as a kebab shop as I speak. He's had nothing to say about the fact that in his 18 years in Parliament, almost a quarter of a million manufacturing jobs have been lost in the West Midlands. He could have been shouting that on every television interview, demanding action, but he never mentioned it once. He never mentioned that our area, the West Midlands, the Black Country, has the biggest increase in rough sleeping of any area in the country. He could have mentioned, but didn't mention, the chronic underfunding and the pain and misery that that has caused to people who were already suffering. Because that job loss I'm talking about is only in the last 18 years. If you factor in the job loss in the Thatcher era, we have lost maybe 500,000 more manufacturing jobs. On top of that, 250,000 during his period of office. I'm going to show my age here. There was a film I was thinking about coming here this evening that I watched when I was young called The Time Machine, where the man sat in his time machine and all the pictures flashed up of how things were changing. If you'd sat in the high street in a time machine and it all flashed by you, what's happened to this area? How sad would you be? That high street now is nothing more than a parade of pound shops and pawnbrokers and cash converters and charity shops and poor people with nowhere to go and no hope. That's the high street in West Brom. I'm in it every day. But if you were to go back, say, to the year before we joined the European Union, you'd see a different West Midlands, wouldn't you? You'd see the workshop of the world. Because somebody asked me today, a young kid, obviously born in the last 18 years, why are you so for Brexit? I said, take a look around you. But what you don't know, and I know, is that it was once different. Once everybody here had a job, an industrial manufacturing job, with a union card, and a guaranteed 40-hour contract, and sick pay, and holiday pay, and equal pay for women. And we had all of that. We had all of that before we joined the European Union. They tried to tell us that somehow the European Union is a great civilizer. It's protecting us somehow. We had all these things. How? Because we had powerful trade unions and a labour movement that didn't depend on dodgy kebab kings for its fundraising and its political representation. We were the workshop of the world. I told this kid, she was looking at me wide-eyed. Once I get started, it's hard to stop me. When we joined the European Union, we had a car industry, a truck industry, a motorcycle industry, a coal industry, a steel industry, a shipbuilding industry. This was called the Black Country for a reason. Because it was black from the manufacturers of hundreds, thousands of engineering companies. Now that's where I come from. Unlike Tom Watson, I never went to a fancy university, although if I had, I would have graduated unlike him. I left school at 16 to work in the car industry of sorts, in making Michelin tires. I worked on an assembly line, on a production line, with my hands. You had to clean them with Swarthega at the end of the shift. Today's Labourites think Swarthega is a Greek island where you go to rave. Swarthega was my bathing choice, not oil of Yule. Swarthega at the end of every shift. And there were thousands of us working in that factory. And our tires were going on your cars, your trucks. Our tires were a necessary part of a great British manufacturing enterprise. And the main reason why I want to leave the European Union is I want to reindustrialize Britain. I want a new industrial revolution, because we cannot make a living selling ice cream cones to tourists. We don't even get any tourists. We cannot depend on financial wizards in the City of London gambling vast sums of other people's money in the casino economy. I mean, as James pointed out to me earlier, I mean, it's not as if nobody's driving cars. It's not as if cars have gone out of fashion. It's just that we are not building them. Somebody else is. And that was a matter of deliberate intent. That was what the German-dominated European Union intended. We'd do the finance, Germany would do the manufacturing, France would do the agriculture and a little bit of manufacturing, and the other places would have tourist tea shops, and we could build motorways between them all and all enjoy a decent holiday. But that's no good in West Brom. We're 150 miles nearly from the City of London. We don't do casino economics. Our people make things. And those things still need to be made. They are still being made. The working class are still making them, just not our working class. And that's why I was so in favour of the European Union exit and fought for it. I said to the BBC today, there's actually nobody that I can think of alive today. Don't tell the wife, she thinks I'm 45. There's nobody, I think, alive in politics today that fought for Brexit for longer than me. I was Tony Benn's runner in the 1975 referendum. It was my job to hold his pipe, hold his tobacco, and bring him his tea. In 1975, I was 21 years old, just 2 years younger than you. You'll be able to tell audiences 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now that you bought me a Coke. I got money in your sock, your Christmas stocking. Yes, sir.
He's 23.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
You remember? Best Prime Minister we had, well, the second best Prime Minister we ever had was Prime Minister at 24.
So I've got a year to go.
You never know. Politics is so volatile now, that could well happen. My point is, we need to get out of the European Union for all kinds of reasons. But not the least of those reasons is because we voted to. I say to people that still want to refight the referendum, it's too late, we've had that argument. We won it, and now it must be implemented, or democracy means nothing at all. If you say to people, you're going to get a vote, it's going to be the final say, but then they don't like what you said, so they tell you they're going to do everything they can to destroy it, you're destroying faith in democracy itself. And that's completely intolerable from my point of view. Now, people say to me, you sure you want to go back into the House of Frauds? There's a lady here done this wonderful image of all these basket cases. Basket, I said. skeletons sitting around a table. And it really is, or was, just about the worst parliament in Britain's history, as bad as the one when Pitt, the younger, was around, and the worst for being elected, unlike the one that selected him. The parliament we had, and I don't think this one's going to be very much better, is a parliament of poodles with pagers who follow whatever the leader tells them to do. And I think you already know I was not that kind of member of parliament. And that's why I ended up independent. I didn't choose it. Tony Blair expelled me from the Labour Party and then abolished my Glasgow constituency just in case. Belt and braces, you know. And I was forced to go on the road as an independent, and I said on the day that he expelled me that he would rue the day. I said it in a very Scottish way, he'd rue the day. And he did rue it, not once but twice. I defeated Labour twice as an independent, and I hope to do so again here in West Brom. And if you give me that chance, I promise you I'll only be here once. Callum would be a good successor. I'll only be here for one term. By the grace of God, I have many children. And I'll be 70 at the next election. I'm 65 now. That's enough. Everybody should be able to retire at 70. In fact, the government's going to make you all retire at 70, or rather work until you're 70. Good luck to you if you dial 999 and a 69-year-old firefighter comes up the stairs. I'll only be here once, and in that once, I will take a broom so stiff that nobody on the end of it will like it, to the town hall, to the Sandwell town hall, where I smell corruption and incompetence of the kind that only comes with one-party states. 72 out of 72 Labour councillors, 72 out of 72, is a recipe for disaster, as it would be if they were Tories or Liberals or anyone else. If you've got no opposition, you think eventually that you can do whatever you like. And the only thing that matters is keeping the leader happy. You get your responsibility payments and your chairmanship of this committee or that committee. You get off on this junket. You put a nose bag on and you eat your way through the next 4 years. Well, I'll be the gale that comes through the door. You like a Clint Eastwood picture? I'll even wear a poncho, have a little cigar hanging out of the side of my mouth, and I'll kick those doors in, and I'll shine a searchlight on every corner of Sandwell Council. And I'll make sure that everybody in the country knows what our problems are and what we need to do to fix them. And you'll hear the words West Brom, not just on Match of the Day. You'll hear the words West Brom in the news. You'll read the words West Brom in the news everywhere. That's the contract I'm prepared to sign with you. West Brom. West Brom is headed for the Premiership. I think it's time you had a Premier class MP. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Now it's time for our questions and answers. So if anyone does have a question to put forth to George, please pop your hand up and I'll come round to you.
Can I say it?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. You mentioned about an industrial revolution,
Yeah.
right? That you want to bring manufacturing back into Sandwell, into West Brom.
Yeah.
Well, considering the future is to do with computers, technology, IA, artificial intelligence, when we've got a gig economy? How is it possible? How do you envisage bringing industrialisation when the future is robotics, and where that they are already considering, is it UBI, universal benefit for everybody, because more and more jobs will be lost to artificial intelligence?
Well, I'm not mad about benefits. I want wages. I want people to work, and I want them to earn decent wages. And I want them to have trade union organisation to ensure that their wages are decent and their conditions are appropriate. I don't accept that the future is computer and robots. As Henry Ford said to the United Auto Workers of America, I could replace all of you and get robots to build my cars. And the workers said, in that case, Mr. Ford, who's going to buy your cars? If all the workers are thrown out of work and replaced by robots, who's going to buy their cars? Neither do I believe that cars, or all the things in this room, all the things in the next room, all the things in the street and in the restaurants and in the high street that you see, are going to start making themselves. Workers make these things. Now, of course, if we can work less and still be paid properly and have more time off, then that's wonderful. But that's some way off. I don't know when the robot revolution will reach West Brom, but I do know that West Brom needs jobs and earnings and spending power right now, starting right now. And I believe that we can do it. You see, when we leave the European Union, we are free as a country to intervene in the economy exactly as we decide to do, exactly as we vote to do, unlike now. So, for example, if the steel industry is going out of business, as it largely has, we're entitled as a country outside the EU to say, actually, we want to keep our steel industry, and we're going to use public investment in order to keep it. Moreover, every vehicle in the country will have to be made here. Every railway line in the country will have to be made here. Every public works, every contract that is given out will have to be British steel, British material, British labour. We're entitled to do that outside of the EU, forbidden to do it inside of the EU. I want the state to take control of significant sections of our economic infrastructure, starting with railways. We now subsidize Richard Branson and the other cowboys 3 times as much as we used to subsidize British Rail. Imagine, we're paying more public money to privateers to run a worse service than we had before when we owned it.
We can't afford to go on the trains.
And we can't afford to go on the trains. It's dearer to go from London to Edinburgh on the train than it is to fly from London to New York City on a railway that we are paying Richard Branson to run. A fortune to run. So I'm for, of course, making use. I'm not a Luddite. If someone had said to me in Michelin, you've got 11 ovens, 11 presses, 11 tires at one time, cooking, but we can have a machine that will mean you need to work less hard. It's hard work. As each oven opened, I had to clear it out, feel for impurities, send the tire down the conveyor belt. And of course, if someone says, we can make your working life easier, hallelujah. As long as you're not putting me out of a job for the robot. Because if you do, I'll have no wages to spend. And I'll not be able to buy any of the things that other people are making. I believe in a planned economy that is not left to the miracles of the private sector to make somehow the right and moral decision. So I fear nothing about this future of automation and robots and artificial intelligence. It will be great. But it's the political intelligence and the emotional intelligence of our political class which I doubt. And the future is definitely not safe for working people in their hands.
The gentleman at the back.
In terms of Richard Branson, I think his history from the 8th of December, because the railway, his railway is going to be taken over by a consortium with the Italian state railway, so-called, taking over. So, I mean, this is the way that it is. And the other thing is, Eddie Dempsey from the RMT sent a letter of solidarity to the Norwegian railway workers because the EU are imposing this thing called the fourth railway package. I remember somebody wrote back from the tweet that he sent and said, well, Norway ain't in the EU, is it, you know? But so, you know, the agreement with the Norwegians, the rail workers are on strike, I understand, because of the imposition of the fourth railway package. And they want it to be more like the British system, the liberal system, I understand. Comrade, I think, you know, I'd like to say, I think you've got the best candidate possible here. I'm speaking as a member of the Socialist Labour Party, and I'd like to say that Arthur Scargill and Ken Capstick sent their regards.
Thank you.
And you know, we'd like to see that, but I mean, to see, I think what we said tonight, makes a lot of sense to me. And we thought about having a candidate against Tom Watson as well. But we couldn't think about a better candidate than George coming in here. One candidate up in Hartlepool, where there are similar circumstances of a Labour MP in a constituency which was largely Leave, but like Watson, the MP knew better, and he's standing again, so, you know, there we go.
Thank you very much indeed. I saw that candidate, that MP, interviewed on national television just a few days ago, and he was explaining Labour's policy, or trying to. I felt sorry for him, he was so poor at trying to do it. And he said, well, we're not having a second referendum. We're going to renegotiate a deal and put that deal to the country with remaining in the EU as an option. And the interviewer said, well, that is a second referendum. And he said, no, we don't call it a second referendum. We call it another referendum. As if there was a distinction. This is a difference without a distinction, the classic one. We're not going to hold a second referendum, we're going to hold another referendum. Labour's policy on the EU is frankly barking mad. The idea that, first of all, the EU are going to negotiate meaningfully with you when they know that you want to remain is a clear and obvious incentive to them to make the deal as bad as possible. The better to guarantee that you're going to remain. Secondly, Corbyn is going to remain neutral, like a sphinx, like Buddha, neither saying he supports or opposes his own deal. And all of the other Labour leaders have already told us they're going to campaign against their own deal. So they're going to go to Brussels, negotiate a deal, come back and campaign against it in the country. And they wonder why they're in real danger of losing seats by the dozen, by the score in Brexit voting areas. In the West Midlands, the East Midlands, the North West, the North East, South Wales. Labour has thrown away millions of voters for whom Brexit was important. Perhaps 5 million Labour voters voted for Brexit, and they're throwing all these votes and all these seats away. Why? Because Labour, when we were in it, when you and I were in it, there was a left wing, yes, there was a right wing, yes, but there was something called Labour. There was something definably Labour. The Labour Party today is unrecognisable from those days. And I joined it when I was 13 years old in 1967. It was a working class party. Now, Labour is a university educated, middle class, metropolitan, liberal culture war. That's what Labour has become. And I myself want nothing to do with it. As I said when you asked me at the very first meeting, would you go back into the Labour Party? I said I'd rather poke my eyes out with a stick.
You know, when you talk about them that got all money,
Yeah.
you know, like big companies like Amazon, how come he's not paying his fair share of taxes and, I mean, the richest man on the planet? And he's closed most of the high street anyway.
Well, the richest people in the country pay the least. I mean, the cleaner of...
That's why the high street's like it is, because he has gone in, and you're all going thinking, oh, well, I'll go online and all this, that and the other, this and the other. But he's crafty, because he wants to open up the high street, but he wants all the franchise.
He wants...
He
wants
so he's got the monopoly.
This is the lady that did this wonderful graphic, by the way. You must all come up and see it.
I didn't actually draw it, I'm not going to draw it.
He wants to pay his tax in Luxembourg, even though the business was transacted in West Bromwich. Even though you bought something in West Brom off him, it was delivered to you, he wants to pretend to the tax authorities that actually that transaction belongs in Luxembourg, where the tax is almost free. And all I say is, more fool any British government that allows that. It's perfectly open to any British government to say any money spent in West Brom, any money spent in Britain is taxed in Britain. Any profit you make out of Britain, you'll pay tax in Britain on that tax, and if you don't like it, we'll close you down entirely. You won't be doing any business or making any profit in Britain if you don't pay your dues to the Exchequer. That's fair enough, isn't it?
Any more questions?
Sorry, it's me again, sorry.
Welcome.
I would just like to make a comment to your last remarks about Amazon. They'll always find loopholes. So unless government is able to close loopholes, it'll happen forever and a day. And the thing is, the government is not very good, or perhaps doesn't want to close the loopholes. But anyway, that isn't my question. My question is, if you get elected, and I hope you do, right, as an independent, how are you going to persuade the government, other parliamentarians, and the judges, if you like, because they seem to have given themselves a more power, how are you going to be able to get across and change, actually change things in this country for the better? And the other part of the question is, I know Sandwell, we had a UKIP councillor elected, so one UKIP councillor and the rest were all Labour. And they had a hell of a time, the way the Labour councillors were so antagonistic and shut him out. So I know you're an experienced person. Are you going to be able to not only challenge, but to actually be able to do and change things in Sandwell, which desperately need changing.
I honestly think you already know the answer to that. Somebody said to me, the BBC today again on the interview I did in the High Street, what difference can one man make? I said, it depends who the man is. If you're talking about a man like the UKIP councillor, they can shun him. They can shut doors on him. They could ignore him, but nobody ignores me. Nobody can ignore me. I have literally millions of followers on social media. You know, 1.74 million followers on social media. I have a radio show, a television show. I have a big voice. People say to me all day in that high street, that's him off the telly. I will put this place on the map, and I'll put our problems on the map, and our solutions will be known to all, and no civil servant will ever ignore me. Neither in Sandwell Council, I've got them running around like blue-arsed flies right now, because, I'll give you, it's a very small example, quite banal. It is the law that they must give me schools for election meetings. I went in and reminded them of this law. They sent a circular around all the schools telling them that that's the law. If I try to book a school for a public meeting, they must give it to me. Then we started getting either no answers from the schools or blocking obscure answers that were clearly playing for time to avoid us having to do so. So, as somebody in here knows, I went to the town hall today. I told them, I'm going to make this a big issue. I may even sue you because I'm having to hire private places to have meetings when I'm entitled to free places in your schools. Well, I'll tell you, our knees were knocking together. I said, so you may well be seeing me in court. By 7 o'clock this evening, a circular had gone round to all the schools in this constituency. For God's sake, give Galloway those schools before you put us in trouble. That's what happens. I met a man once who'd just retired from a government agency that I used to phone most Saturday nights on behalf of my then constituents. He said, your name was flagged on the board. If a call came from you, everybody went running around in order to deal with it. Because would you want to have a fight with me? Trust me, these civil servants don't want to fight me. Anything for a quiet life. Yes, Mr. Galloway, we'll attend to that right away. And so I promised constituents, first of all, I've already published my telephone number to 63,000 people. I am the only, that's why it's pinging all the time right now, I'm the only politician in history in this country to publish their private telephone number. And you can phone me day or night, anytime, 7 days a week. And when you do, you'll get the best of attention. And when I phone up the agencies, the departments, the council staffs, on your behalf, trust me, they'll jump to it.
One more?
One question on the internet, George. What is your policy for WASPy women? Perhaps you can explain what WASPy means.
Yeah. The WASPy women are the women, millions of women that have been robbed of their pensions. Everyone's now saying what they are going to do for the WASPy women. So let me tell you what I already did for the WASPy women. I've supported their campaign from the absolute inception, and all of them will tell you that. I've put them on my television shows. I've put them on my radio shows. Over and over again, before anyone else in the country, other than the women affected, knew what this issue even was. And if I'm in Parliament, I'll hunt down the people that stole the money from these women until it is reinstated.
One last one? Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, George, but I need to know, how can honest socialists who have formed the vanguard of the fight against racism in this country for generations fight back against spurious allegations of anti-Semitism?
Well, this, what I call the great anti-Semitism smear, will go down in British history, already is now in British history, as the most successful black op in British political history. Anti-Semitism is a real thing. It really exists. And at its height or depth, it led to the mass slaughter of millions of people in the lifetime of some people still alive today. There are still people alive today that escaped from that Holocaust. Nothing could be more serious. And therefore, nothing could be more serious or reprehensible than lying about someone that they're anti-Semitic. Because you are implicitly branding them as being on a par with those who industrially slaughtered 6 million Jewish people in the late 30s and 40s in Europe. Nothing could be more serious than that. Now, I have many criticisms of Jeremy Corbyn. I think he's a very weak and poor leader. I think he's better than Boris Johnson, but I think he's a weak and poor leader. And he's handled many things very badly. But the idea that Corbyn is anti-Semitic is utterly obscene and absurd. He is guilty, he's guilty only of one thing, standing up for the Palestinian people in their Calvary over these last 70 years. People whose country was wiped off the map, whose people were scattered to the four corners of the earth, one of whom I met today in West Bromwich High Street, with a pure black country accent, but he's Palestinian. Scattered, their name wiped out, stateless, paperless, passportless, hopeless. All Corbyn has done is stand up for them. And Labour's policy to recognise a Palestinian state, and more importantly, to ban the sale of British weapons to Netanyahu's Israel, are two policies I wholeheartedly support. It's like the boy who cried wolf. That's a story, that's a parable for a reason. That if you make false allegations over and over and over again, when the real thing comes along, nobody will believe you. And the wolf will really be there. And these wolves are there. We have to keep it in perspective. There are 10 convictions a year in Britain for anti-Semitic crimes, only a tiny percentage of which involve violence. And I know about political violence. Why do you think I'm wearing a hat? Because I was a victim of political violence. And I'm hiding my scars. 10 convictions a year in a country of 65 million people. I was at a Sikh event on Saturday where turban-wearing Sikh people have a level of hate crime against them that absolutely dwarfs the number of anti-Semitic crimes in this country. And if you were to begin to calculate crimes against Muslim people, by the way, the Sikhs are being attacked because the idiots that are attacking them think they're Muslims. Because everybody loves Sikhs if they know they're Sikhs. they're being attacked because idiots think that they are Muslims. If you add the hate crimes in this country against all the other minority groups. By the way, I see that Bogus is claiming to be a Muslim, but he's got his own brewery. He brews his own beer with his name on it. But he was at the mosque last week.
It's halal.
It's halal beer. So, all hate crime has to be treated exactly the same, with absolute zero tolerance and ruthless punishment. Ruthless punishment. That'll do me. If it'll do you, that'll do me.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along tonight, and I hope George has answered your questions as best he could. The first thing is, if you are interested, we are back at our normal venue on Friday at West Bromwich Working Men's Social Club, which is 36 Dudley Street, B70 9LS. And then the second thing from myself is just a little summary. We have, and you have to forgive me, I'm getting a little bit like Boris Johnson, repeating myself over and over again. I said it at the last meeting, I'll say it at this one, and I'll say it at every meeting going forward. We have a unique opportunity in West Bromwich East that a lot of constituencies up and down don't have. We can vote the two traditional parties and continue this downward spiral, what we're on. Or we can vote for George Galloway and put a working class representative as our MP. Thank you.